Hello, everybody. This is Laura from Healing with Spirit. Welcome to our next episode of Triggers in Spiritual Medicine. Today is going to be an amazing episode with Eli Hans. And just to kind of give you a little bit of background about who we are for those who are new and a little bit about Eli before we get started. We hope by addressing the intersectionality with all these different things that are happening in the world today and connect the dots like a web of many of society's challenges, we can help others really kind of understand the root to some of our challenges, including our health. Rooted especially in things like trauma as like an infection that impacts all of the areas of our life, including addiction, domestic violence, racism, homelessness, sex abuse, chronic health issues, cancer, to environmental issues, climate change, and more. So the vision really is to help others break the cycle of unrecognized, unresolved, unhealed trauma, and to create a more sustainable system for recovery, for healing, and empowerment, and to really open up to new perspectives of solutions, healing, and resolutions that can be birthed. Because we know there's a lot of stuff going on in the world today, and a lot of people are being triggered, and sometimes we don't even know where those triggers are coming from. And hopefully with these podcasts, these episodes, we can bring in different people with different stories, different backgrounds, and kind of shatter some of these myths and bring in some of this healing that we all need. So about Eli, oh my gosh, his story is so amazing. And I cannot wait for you to hear this magic of what Eli is going to be bringing. But he is a true, he has in his bio, by the way, a true Renaissance man. And just what I've learned so far, he really is a true Renaissance man. He is an actor, writer, artist, producer, director, singer, and recently a composer. And one of the things we're going to be talking about is how he reinvented his career, his life, and everything about him after he was diagnosed from cancer. He went from being a producer and a director of TV commercials and large-scale corporate events to interior design, and also a creativity coach. And he has this amazing musical that he created after surviving a dire cancer diagnosis. I'm going to let him talk about that, but welcome, Eli.
Thank you. Thank you. I think that what you're doing is amazing, and I'm happy to be here and be part of this conversation.
Well, thank you for being here. Before I forget, because I have been told I forget this piece, for those of you who are listening, please make sure you subscribe, follow, do all that good stuff to help us gain traction and visibility. That would really be appreciated. Please share with us a little bit about your story. Like how did this all happen? And, we talk about sometimes the triggers, and when we look at like root issues, especially like things like cancer, right? We dive deep and we go into like, what are some of those triggers? And tell us a little about your story of what you learned going through that healing journey.
Wow. Well, there's a lot, but I'm going to try to focus it. In 2014, I was diagnosed with a pretty heavy-duty, rare and aggressive lymphoma. Much later, my oncologist told me she thought I had about a 10% chance of survival. And an event like that pretty much changes your life if you let it. Initially, of course, I was
Can you repeat
shocked.
that, by the way, to people, for people that are struggling with cancer?
An event like that can truly change your life for the better if we let it. And what I want to say is, at the beginning, of course, I was terrified, and it's a shock to the system to hear that. It's almost kind of surreal. But now that it's been 8 years, and I've been cancer-free for 7 of those 8 years, I really look back and I see what a gift that experience was, because it absolutely changed the direction of my life, and it kind of kicked my butt and kind of put me back on the path I was supposed to be on. Somehow I had veered off my path. I thought I was doing great. I mean, I had a very successful interior design business. My husband and I moved to San Miguel de Allende in Mexico, which is a gorgeous, incredible place to live. Everything was going well, but I was feeling still very stressed, and my business was doing well, and it was all about the next job and getting the bigger job and making more money and all those kinds of things. And what I came to realize through a lot of introspection and, I really embarked on a deep journey of self-discovery was that, the irony didn't escape me that I had this systemic blood cancer when I looked back at my life growing up as a gay boy in a conservative Mexican Jewish community in Mexico City, later moving to the States and finding, they don't like Mexicans here, and they don't really like Jewish people here. They don't really like Polish people here, and they don't really like gay people here. So all of those emotions had not been examined, and they were festering inside unconsciously under the radar.
We are a
And
culture that does that, right? Like we are a
yes,
culture that,
absolutely.
like, we're just told, cowboy it up and just get on with it. We're not taught how to process, right? Or we medicate it away, which is still a Band-Aid, right?
Yeah, well, we're not really taught that that disease can come from an emotional state or spiritual state. A lot of it is like, well, I have this disease, so now I need a pill or a medicine or something that can just make the symptoms go away. But when we talk about deep healing, from my point of view, and by the way, this entire conversation comes from my perspective and my point of view. So, but I really discovered that in order to truly heal to the core, I had to learn to make peace with these aspects of my past and heal these unresolved emotions that were there, and a lot of forgiveness and all of that. So that's what I did for the next couple of years, on top of doing some conventional medicine and doing a lot of alternative stuff, like meditation, journaling, acupuncture, complete diet change, supplements, all of that. And slowly I began to just come home to myself. And it felt like, yes, this is who I'm supposed to be. So I let go of my interior design business and I became trained to be a life and creativity coach. And later I started coaching cancer patients also as a holistic cancer coach. And that was going well for a few years until I started feeling, when I turned 60 a year and a half ago, I felt like something new wanted to be birthed. Like I wanted to go bigger. I wanted to share my message with more than just one person at a time. I wanted to take this out into the world. So it was COVID. And I was sitting here with all this time. And one of the things I preach about a lot is really learning to use our natural talents and our natural gifts to express fully who we are in the world and make a difference in the world. And to me, there's nothing more fulfilling than that. And if you can figure out how to do that and make great money at it too, then, what's better than that? So I kind of started downloading my story into a play.
Can you explain for people that may not understand some of the terminology of what downloading means?
Downloading means that it really, like, there was some kind of universal force that was coming through me that wasn't so much me doing this. It really felt like a calling, like this is the thing you have to do. And we're here to help you. I don't really know who the we is, but I really felt like there was a lot of support from the universe in doing this. So I started writing the story, which later became a musical, which my big one regret in my life is not ever having made it on Broadway. And I never really gave myself a chance to be on Broadway. I always thought it would be too competitive and I wasn't made for all that competition. So I thought, you know what, I'm going to write a freaking musical that I can do on my own. So it became a musical and I started downloading all this music. I don't really know anything about music theory or orchestrations or anything like that. I taught myself how to do that. And I wrote this beautiful music. Later, I sent it to a music arranger that made it better. So I created a musical. It's called Out of the Blue. And it's Out of the Blue refers to all the miracles that have happened in my life that kind of changed the direction of my life by listening to my intuition.
And tell people, because we hear sometimes all the time, we see it a lot even right now, where people are being triggered out the rear end right now, right? With especially all the political instability and things like that are happening. And we keep hearing from people, why can't we just go back to the way it was? Why can't we just have like this? All these things, instead of like talking, like really sitting and being okay with the unknown, but creating enough space to allow what you're talking about. Can you maybe share for those that might be struggling, or all like that kind of slight paradigm shift there, right? Because there is that
Yeah.
paradigm shift, right?
Yeah. And you know what? I'm so glad you asked that, because the way that this was birthed, I forgot about it. I just remembered with that comment you just made was, I think the key is to give yourself permission to explore these aspects of yourself. So when I turned 60, you know what my gift was to myself?
What was it?
I gave myself permission to follow my joy for 30 days, guilt free.
Mm.
So I thought, I'm just going to do what I love for 30 days. So I kind of wrapped up all my clients and I gave myself 30 days off. And I didn't know what it was. Like, I had kind of lost touch with it. So I took naps and I thought, well, that's nice. And then I started reading novels instead of like self-help books, I thought, well, I'm loving this. But then I reconnected to a hidden passion of mine that I hadn't explored in like years, which was singing. I love to sing. So I started singing with like little karaoke tapes and stuff. And I wrote a parody of a Disney song it was my wish for the world about COVID. And I did a little video for my family. And I put it on Facebook. And all of a sudden, it's been seen like 4,000 or 5,000 times. I don't know how many. I started getting comments from all over the world, from people I didn't know, about, oh my God, this touched me so much. And this made me cry. And oh, this is so beautiful. And I thought, wow, there's something here. Then I extended the 30 days and I gave myself permission to write this musical. So it's been a year and a half. We just had our world premiere in March. We had sold out shows. It was so beautifully received. I didn't know what an audience would do with our show. And we just finished doing a run at the Hollywood Fringe Festival and got an award for an encore performance. So as we
That's
speak here,
amazing. That
yeah,
is
so
so
all of a sudden,
amazing.
this little dream, by giving myself permission to follow my intuition and to give myself joy, blossomed into this thing.
Mm. Tell me, because again, like we talked about before we were on, like a lot of people are struggling right now, whether it's cancer, especially those that are even in the LGBTQ community right now, because of some of the backlash we're seeing that's
Yeah.
happening. Can you like explain, with going through like your own challenges in the conservative family, of what if they could do anything right now to kind of just shift, what would be some of that look like to try to help them get through some really dark times that maybe they're experiencing right here?
That's a beautiful question. I think that at the core of all of that is a hidden message under the radar that I think all of us, whether you're in the LGBTQ community or not, or just if you're human and you live in this current society, there's a message of there's something wrong with you, you don't belong, or you're not good enough, right? I think we all have that secret fear that we might not be good enough, or that there maybe really is something wrong with us. So, with what's going on in Florida and Texas about, no, you can't say gay or you can't do this, there's a message saying there's something wrong with you. So when it's the essential core aspect of who we are, our sexuality is our expression at a very deep level. I mean, it's like basic number one survival chakra, the sexual chakra and everything. It's how can you deny who you are? And so when we start feeling there's something wrong with us and start internalizing that, a chain reaction happens that starts showing off in low self-esteem, or abusing drugs and alcohol, or we internalize all that, it becomes chronic illness. So for me, really exploring that and learning to love ourselves, learning to accept who we are, is so crucial with what's going on in the world, and just enjoying this beautiful person that each of us is, We all have a gift and we all have something to share with the world.
Mm.
So it's time. I think there's never been a better time than now, because the world needs healing, for each of us to heal our lives and to really show up in the world with our gifts and play our role in helping the world heal.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a misperception too about healing, and I see, and especially in the healing communities, there's a lot of surface healing, which I feel like some of the surface healing, like, as I've been working towards getting a certification in addiction counseling to kind of complement what I'm doing.
Mm-hmm.
And I've noticed that some of this surface healing is becoming addictive, like a glass of wine. I want another
Mm-hmm.
glass of wine. I want another glass. And so some of the surface healing becomes that. And then we wonder why we never penetrate some of the deeper levels. And a lot of the healing is not just our own stuff, what we see on the surface, but it's the stuff mentally, emotionally, physically, spiritually, generationally, karmically, past lives. It's
Yes.
all of it. And the universe is calling upon all of it to be integrated in the here and the now, right?
Well,
And
and
it's the yin and the yang and the balance between both, right?
yes. And I honestly believe that everything does happen for a reason, even weird events and global events like COVID.
Mhm.
I mean, the positive side of COVID is that it allowed for those of those people who took that opportunity for a lot of introspection, a lot of inner healing work. It's like everything stopped. Now here you are with yourself. And it's like some people freaked out about that and just hated it. I happen to love it. I just loved
Yeah.
like having time to, okay, who am I? What do I really want to do? What do I need to heal?
Oh, I
In
think we
my,
talk about like I use the metamorphosis of a butterfly all the time. And I say,
Mhm.
everybody talks about the butterfly, but nobody wants to talk about what it takes to get to become the butterfly. And COVID, actually, I was a guest on another episode in somebody else's podcast at the
Mhm.
beginning of COVID, talking about isolating versus cocooning,
Mhm.
that whole concept, because everybody's going, oh my God, isolation and freaking out. And I can get that, but I go, when we go from like the caterpillar to the butterfly, you have to cocoon. And that cocooning, especially if there's unresolved trauma and there's a lot of stuff you're triggered by, can be very frightening. But
Yeah.
when we can surrender and to know that there's something bigger than ourselves, our souls have a greater wisdom than our egos and our minds, right? That we have to cocoon in order to become the butterfly. We have to liquefy. We have to go into isolation. We have to do it with nobody around and holding our hand besides the tree or the branch, right? Or the glass blade, right? And trust that the universe has our back, guiding us every step of the way. And
Well,
before we know it, we poke through and our wings emerge, right?
you just said a keyword, trust with a capital T. And that's what I've discovered when I look back at my life and all those out of the blue moments of miracles, that trust and faith were very much involved. When we can't see what's ahead and it's scary and we still take the leap, we have to trust that there is some way that wings will, help us fly or whatever. I mean, it sounds a little cliche, but really trusting in our higher power, or trusting that there is a higher plan. The other day I saw somebody posted something on Facebook that really struck me. It was like our idea of our life, and it was a very simple little plan of a house, like a two-dimensional, here's the living room, here's one bedroom, and here's one bathroom, like a two-dimensional floor plan. And then the idea of the universe for our life, and it was this like mansion, and it was this gorgeous thing. We tend to think small, I think, in trying to control a lot of what we think needs to happen. But if we
Ah,
just trust
yeah.
to go with the flow and to just have the doors open in front of us, then amazing things happen.
And you just said a key thing there too. It's about the control. And I know, like, even in my own healing journey early on, when I started 20 years ago, and I had somebody said, you're trying to control everything. And I said, I'm really not. Right. And but that's the hidden bias. That's what's not being seen because I couldn't see it, right? And when you start going through the journey, we start realizing, and even from a trauma response, when we go into a trauma response, or we go into, being a reactive response, right? That, or we go into trauma drive, which is a whole nother aspect. Those are all forms of ways to control situations, people, places, things, because it's a way of shielding and protecting. And because we don't trust ourselves, we don't trust the decisions that we make. And when we can surrender into a place of knowing that that our souls, that spirit, that the universe has a greater wisdom than us, because it always knows, like the sun always knows the same, like always rises. The trees always know when to shed their leaves. They know when to bud. The trees, the flowers know when to perk. They know when to bloom. They know when to bear fruit. The bees know somehow instinctually to go to this particular flower and get the pollen and bring it back to the hive, right? So that's all these things, because all these aspects and life forms trust. They are in synchronicity with a life force that humans, I think, have gotten unplugged from for too long.
Yep, absolutely.
Please share with us, the medicine of your play. Tell us what it's about and some of the response of what you're getting from people, especially from a demographic that, because of your background and what some of the story is, like, kind of is surprising and beautiful and amazing.
Yeah, well, like I was saying, Out of the Blue is very autobiographical. And first, I want to say, exploring Out of the Blue, but exploring our healing and the way that you were speaking about takes a lot of courage. It really takes a lot of courage. When I realized that in order to really heal to the core, even though I had just been declared being in remission, meaning that I was cancer-free at that moment, I knew that if I wanted to stay in remission, I had to really do the healing to the core. And I was so freaking terrified, and it took a lot of courage to be able to step forward, because I didn't know what that meant. I didn't know but you know what? It was in my mind. The fear is always in our mind. The truth was that it was a beautiful journey. And as I went back, so my play, because you were asking, it starts with me announcing, that I had cancer and realizing that I had to heal. And then we have 2 suitcases in my show that represent the baggage of my past. And as I open and I pull different costumes on, I play 25 different characters, and I go back into my past as a boy when I was realizing something was wrong with me and my parents. And I actually have 2 wonderful characters that I love, Shame and Fear. They're personifications of shame and fear that are so much fun to play, because Shame is such a nasty diva. She's like, just a nasty bitch, but really sarcastic.
But shame is a in this cross is all demographics, right? Shame, and it's really like a very patriarchal colonialist mindset. It's a power weapon.
It's control. And shame is a form of control, societal norms and all that. So I revisit different parts of my life, and the show starts with a lot of fun. It's very entertaining. It's very funny. And then once the audience is enrolled and we're all on this journey together, then we start going through some of the challenges, because I lived through the birth of the AIDS crisis in the 80s, and it was terrifying. I lost all my friends, and it was just so scary to go through that. And then I finally fell in love with someone, and everything was finally going great. And then he got cancer and ended up committing suicide. And that absolutely changed my life in enormous ways. I had PTSD for 5 years, and it was just a very dark time. But even through that, you can emerge from those things. So the show talks about how I pulled all those kind of unraveled parts of my tapestry of my life, and I pulled all those threads together to find this wonderful new life, in which I met my current husband 22 years ago. And he shows up in the show. We reenact the miraculous way in which we met. It was just unbelievable how we met. And then I get cancer. And then the third act is how he supports me in healing as all these awarenesses start coming through. And so there's musical numbers, there's songs, there's dance numbers. And in the end, the most surprising thing is that we always have talkbacks after the show, like a 20-minute talkback with the audience. And I had no idea how audiences were going to respond to this kind of gay story about healing from cancer, right? It's very unique. And so it's a musical with one person on stage.
Especially with all the stuff too, with the backlash,
Yeah.
culturally right now, right? In some demographics, right? And so
Yeah.
it's very brave, during a time too, to be able to bring this out,
Well, you know what? This is the time in my opinion, to start telling the truth.
Yeah.
Social media, it's all about, oh, look how pretty I am. Oh, look how everything, it's so superficial. And coming out of COVID, where a lot of that introspection happened with a lot of people, I felt that, our show premiered right after, COVID started settling down a little bit. They were ripe. The audience has been ripe to hear an authenticity, raw truth, wrapped in a very fun, entertaining, candy wrapper. But my audience has been largely, I would imagine, straight. I mean, I don't know, but I would say 90 to 95% straight from what I can gather. And the feedback is always, wow, we could totally relate to everything in your show, even though we're not gay, and even though that's not our story, because the themes are universal about there's something wrong with me. I'm not
It's
good
the
enough.
humanity.
It's the
It's the
humanity. I don't
humanity.
belong.
Yeah.
Who do I need to be to belong in this world? Those are all the themes. And in the end, there's so much hope and so much inspiration. The show ends in a very high note with a really wonderful musical number. Everybody's like clapping and everything. People are just like cheering at the end, I think, for themselves. And I've had comments of people who confessed in front of other people in the audience that they've been, depressed for the last 2 years, and the show just lightened them up. Or, somebody told me a few days later that they were thinking of suicide, and after seeing my show, they changed their mind and decided to live. And so it's been very impactful.
That's amazing.
At a deep level.
So tell me, I mean, that's incredible, because it's really about that, right? It's about making impact,
Yeah, it's
right?
about making a difference.
And your gift is storytelling. Obviously, it seems like you're a wonderful storyteller, and you're able to do it visually. I mean, I'm trying to complete this book, and as I'm listening to you, I'm like, damn, if I was only like gifted like that, right? But my gift is telling my story differently through a different lens. And I think that is part of the healing journey, is knowing how to use whatever gifts we're given.
Yes.
To use it to heal. So tell me, give the audience, I should say, 3 action steps or 3 tips of what they could do today if they're struggling, whether it's from cancer, on how they can reinvent, or whether they're struggling with their own identity. Like 3 tips that they could do today to kind of leap forward in a different direction than where they're at right now.
Well, first I want to say, before I do the 3 tips, is that whoever you are, wherever you are in your journey, you are loved, you are worthy, and you are here on this planet for a reason, and that is to fully share your gifts with the world. That is truly what I believe. And if you say, well, I don't have any gifts, yes, you do. You have gifts. And if you need clues, start looking at your past and your childhood. What did you love to do, or time would just happen and you would get lost in it? That's a clue. So you are loved, and you are worthy of being on this planet, and you are worthy of being well and healed and healthy. I absolutely believe that. Otherwise, you wouldn't be here. So a takeaway, I would say, is, for me, what has been key in my life, in my healing, is developing a really close relationship with my intuition. So people say, well, I'm not intuitive, or I don't know how to do that, or whatever. Yes, you are intuitive, because we all have those gut feelings. I'm sure all of us have had like red flags about something, and then we haven't listened, and then we go, oh, why didn't I listen? That was your intuition telling you something. So um, I have spent a lot of time learning to develop that connection to my intuition, because the voice sounds very different than the other nagging voice that's in our heads. The
It is so
nagging,
true. It is
the,
so true, because I mean, when I do like intuitive events, and people would say, well, what's the difference between like a psychic and a medium, for instance, right? And I say, well, everybody in this room is psychic.
yeah,
I said, because, whether you call it psychic, intuition, I go, or mother's instinct or gut instinct or
hmm,
whatever. I said, we all, for instance, go to school, we all learn how to play basketball, but not everybody's going to go to the NBA, but we all still know how to dribble to some degree and know how to shoot it in the hoops, right? It's the same thing. You got to just, the difference is learning to trust and exercise that intuitive muscle is the difference.
well, the thing is that it's not encouraged as we grow up to really listen to our intuition. There's all
No,
these rules and there's all these things you have to follow and all these ways of doing things. So what I wanted to say about your intuition is that for me, when I hear the intuitive voice, it's always peaceful. It's always brings me calm. The other voice is nagging and annoying. And well, what if this happens? And what if that happens? And what? That's not intuition.
that's the ego, right? That's the
That's the
head.
ego. And that voice is louder. The other voice is very subtle. So what do we need to do? Meditate, calm down. Journaling has been an amazing tool for me, because when I start writing, somehow that other voice takes over my writing. And all of a sudden it transcends my thinking and it goes someplace else to intuitive guidance. So I
Yeah.
get a lot of intuitive hits when I write.
And for those that also have intuition, like my father was an osteopathic physician, and he gave me one of his medical books when he was in medical school from the 1960s. And it was about the founder of osteopathic medicine, Dr. Stills. And it was fascinating because I've watched my father diagnose cancer in patients when all the tests were negative. I watched him diagnose appendicitis and thyroid disease when all the tests were negative. And in this textbook talks about the power, and they were teaching doctors at some point how to use intuition as a diagnostic tool.
Wow.
And that is one of the things that I know from growing up in a medical family that has been taught out of medicine, because it's become policy, procedure,
Right.
Dot your I, cross your T. And there's so
Right.
much emphasis that there is no time to really trust those instincts, right?
Yeah.
And how do you do that? So for those of you who say, again, because I'm looking at those naysayers too, like saying, well, I still can't do that. It was taught. And there was actually in Poland, when we were looking at, and I was teaching aspects of even how to read your aura. We all have that aura, and people just don't go, what's your aura? Well, that's the electrical conduction system. Energy vibrates out. Your computer, if you put your hand on your computer, you put your hand on the top of your car after you turn the engine off, you don't have to touch the car, but you can feel the heat and the energy vibrating from it. It's the same thing from us. We have two places in the brain and in the heart that self-generate electricity that vibrates out to cause what's called the aura. In Poland, I didn't know if you know this, there was a doctor who was teaching doctors and nurses on how to read the aura to diagnose cancer and illness in folks. So again, it's still part of that intuitive, because you have to be able to shut down and see things through a slightly different lens to be able to use that power and skill set.
Well, and remember too, I mean, we live or people who live in the United States, that's one reality, but that's not the entire reality of the whole planet. There are other places in the world where I'm sure that intuition is much more nurtured in other tribes or other cultures. In ours, it's all about just do work, boom, 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 rat race kind of thing. So yeah, so definitely following the intuitive guidance has been a lifesaver for me. When I was healing from cancer and I was told, you got to do this, you got to do this, you got to do this, I filtered it through that. I go, this one doesn't feel right. This doesn't feel right. This feels right.
Yes.
This feels right. So instead of approaching my healing through my mind, I just use my mind to gather information, but then I put it through my filter of what feels right for me.
And that feeling is different. Like we're not talking feeling like I'm anxious, I'm stiff, I'm feeling, but that type of feeling that's emotional, is still from the mind, right?
Right.
This is a different feeling
It's a
that
sensation of knowing.
yeah,
It's
it's
like
an
an
inner
inner
knowing.
knowing. Yeah.
Yeah.
An inner knowing. It's like, when you meet someone right away, you just go, I like this person, or I don't like this person. It's an intuitive hit.
Yes.
So recognize that as
Absolutely.
an intuitive hit. It's like, oh, I love this person's energy. You just tap right into their energy without having to be woo-woo about it. You just know, yes, I can
Yeah.
trust this person. I
Yeah.
can't trust this person. So intuitive hits are awesome. And if we learn to trust them and to move forward, for me in my life, more often than not, they're right. And so I've just learned to just go with it. The next one I would say that, as we mentioned before, I think that all of us truly have very unique gifts that we were born with, that sometimes we have stuffed away because they're not practical, or I can't make money doing that. That happens to a lot of artists and musicians, and parents say, well, that's fine, but you need a good career. I mean, you can't just be an artist. So I would say tune into what those natural gifts are and really start exploring them, and you can get better at them. Those gifts can be honed, and we can learn to improve some of those skills. Some of those are naturally talented at certain things, but we can even get better at them. Many years ago, I was trying to figure out, oh, what's my purpose in life? What's my purpose in life? I don't know why I'm here. What is the thing? And I asked, can you just tell me what my purpose is? And I heard something that I didn't expect that really calmed me down for years. And I want to share that with you and your audience, because maybe it will help you. And what that was, very simple. I heard, you are here to fully express who you came here to be. And there was an emphasis on fully. So we're not here to live simple, small lives. We're here to fully express who we are. And that means what natural gifts we have to share with the world. And if we can do it and make the world a better place in any way that we choose, that's why we're here.
Yeah. And
And I
I've go
think,
ahead.
I just want to say, I think that when we connect to our passion about why we're
Yeah.
here, I think that these other things like addictions and all these angst and depressions start falling away, because we're finally doing our purpose.
Yeah. And sometimes for those who might be struggling, I find that it's linked to also where sometimes I say to my clients, your soul came here to learn a lesson. What is that lesson? And sometimes, especially if you're in deep trauma and you go, I just can't, or deep addiction and you go, I just can't, right? Or
Mm-hmm.
deep cancer and you go, I just can't, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we make all those excuses of why we can't. And instead of really surrendering and saying, and going outside of our story and saying, you know what, your soul chose, and this is just like a theory, right? Where soul chose this life experience. And for those who are hearing, I'm not saying like you deserved to be abused. I'm not saying you deserved like some of the experiences you're saying. I'm just saying our souls came here to learn how we champion over this stuff, right?
Exactly. I mean, I would
And
never want to choose to have cancer, and I would never want to wish that on anyone.
no,
But in hindsight, when we look at
yeah,
our lives and we're in a good place in our lives, we can see how that old, maybe shitty relationship actually served us in some way, because it prepared us for this next good relationship,
yeah.
or whatever it is.
I mean,
So,
yeah, because like I look at, like my quick history was I grew up with domestic violence in the household. Then I lost my virginity to a rapist at 15. I was actually sexually abducted, nothing quite, well, I shouldn't say that. I was fondled, but I wasn't like, it wasn't like I didn't at 12. Okay. I'll just put it like that. And then it led me, because society says, no therapy, keep it in the family, or silence. I didn't even speak about it until the whole Me Too movement, some of those things. And then I married my abuser, who stole 20 years of my life. And I can sit there and go, poor woe is me, my life sucks, and blah, 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 blah. How am I going to do it? And I've learned that the more I was able to step outside of the story, I was able to heal things much faster and address the root issues quicker. Now, and not only that, but it helped me to, like, some of the work I do with folks, I'm able to do that because I was able to champion over that. So if it wasn't for those difficulties, those, what, like Esther Hicks calls them contrast, areas of contrast, right? That if I wasn't able to conquer them, I couldn't tell somebody how to heal trauma or how do you heal cancer, for instance, if we never walked that journey.
Well, that journey, my dear, is the classical hero's journey. And that is why we see movies. And that's why we read these wonderful stories. And in the hero's journey, the hero is always reluctant. They're not out to say, I'm going to be a hero. They're always like, why is this happening? And then they have a struggle and they overcome it. And there's another struggle and then they overcome it and they overcome.
Like Superman with kryptonite, right?
Right. And then there's always the villain, right? And then there's all these struggles. And then in the end, in the third act of every movie you see, every good movie, there's the battle scene, right? Where the guy finally says yes, and he owns, or she owns, their power. And then they finally overcome the villain. But the thing about a hero's story or the hero's journey is that, and this is what you're doing, and this is what I'm doing with our hero's journey, is that it serves no freaking purpose if we don't share it back with the world. Because when we've learned to overcome something and we can then help to guide other people through it, that's why we're here. Otherwise, it just feels so selfish. It's like, well, I figured it out. It's like, I healed from cancer. It's like, good, you figured out by yourself. If there's anything that I can do to help people, or what you're doing to help people heal through trauma, that's really what the hero's journey is about, to go back to the community and say, hey,
this is the medicine.
I went through challenges, right? And let me help you. Let me help you. So that's the beautiful part of it. And we all go through our own hero's journeys. So that's why we relate so well to all those stories.
Absolutely. So what would be the third, like, medicinal or action or tip you would give?
I would say the third powerful is kind of like a two parts to it: forgiveness and gratitude. Forgiveness of ourselves for the choices we've made that maybe weren't so great, for the way mainly that we have internalized and beat ourselves up as a result of events in our lives. Why did I do that? I'm so stupid. Why did I, all that kind of stuff. Forgiving ourselves deeply with a lot of love, and also forgiving others in our lives. If there's some way that we can see that they were there to show us something or teach us something. I don't know what it is. Forgiveness is a multi-layered approach, but for me,
and by the way, for those with forgiveness, because I know I work with a lot of even sex abuse survivors, this doesn't mean like you're letting your abuser or your rapist off the hook. That's a whole different thing. So I want to just clarify.
Because forgiveness doesn't mean that you're condoning anyone's actions. But you're not forgiving them for them. You're forgiving them for you, so you can be free. When you were talking about the story, an event happens and it's in the past, but what keeps it alive is the story we keep telling ourselves about it. And if we can disengage from the story, that we can be free of that, so and part of disengaging from the story is through forgiveness. I have found that has worked for me in my life. And the other aspect of it is gratitude. If we can really live our life in gratitude for everything we have and everything we don't have, and just like live a gratitude practice at the end of the night, come up with 7 things you're grateful for that happened that day. Like even if you have cancer and you're in pain, well, maybe your elbow doesn't hurt, or maybe you were able to pee without pain, or maybe you had a little more energy today, or maybe you were able to eat something that you hadn't eaten for a while. Anything minor, because there is a universal law that states that what you focus on grows stronger in your life. So if we start focusing on gratitude, those things start becoming more present in our life. So for me, forgiveness and gratitude has been huge.
And gratitude is, it's interesting about gratitude because it's also part of the book I'm writing that's coming out. And gratitude is in there because it's incorporating these Japanese teachings, and in the Japanese culture, like with with my rooted teachings, they look at things like anger and worry as like very low dense vibrational energy that's linked to every known illness and disease.
Mm-hmm.
And the antidote is gratitude. So I know when I was trying to incorporate these topics and things, I'm going, gratitude? What the fuck should I be gratitude for? Like, what the like, and I'm going through this moment of like, I haven't seen my kids. I got the system. They did this to me and I had that. So I went pure victim mode. Like,
Oh, yeah.
why should I be grateful? Because nothing is like, the universe took everything away from me. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And when I started understanding, like, well, I can't be grateful because I'm rooted in worry or anger. So it's like, it's that also that paradigm of rooting out. So if you're struggling with gratitude, like I found like addressing the anger and the worry piece, right? Making peace with it somehow.
Yes.
And gratitude should come from a place of being grateful with no attachment. When you haven't gone to that place of non-attachment with gratitude, I'm grateful for the sake of being grateful. There's no attachment. So there's not well, I'm grateful, for this, but if that changes, then I'm not grateful anymore. Right. So it's like, and I would say just be very, I say to clients, like when we can just build that sense of awareness of even how gratitude like flows easily and effortlessly in our life, versus where we struggle with it. Because when we struggle with it, it's giving us clues, right? There's those intuitive clues like a GPS system. And when it flows easily and effortlessly, it gives us clues, right? So it's looking at like, there's some of the cure right here when it flows easily and effortlessly. When we struggle with it, it's also holding clues to maybe areas in our life that still need some work or adjustment, right?
Yeah. And I think that when we talk about these things, if we're right in the middle of a crisis, like a chronic illness or, any situation where we're right in the middle of it, these ideas might seem really foreign. Like, well, that's easy
Difficult.
for you to say because you don't know what's. And all I want to say is that I've been in that exact place where I thought when I had some really severe neurological side effects to the treatments. And I just felt I'm just going to be stuck having these seizures like the rest of my life. I mean, how can I be grateful for anything? I can't speak quickly. I can't, it was just terrible. When you're in the middle of it, yes, it's very difficult. But what my husband kept telling me every day was, this is temporary.
Yes, this too shall pass, right?
Temporary. And I said, are you sure this is temporary? And he'd always say, I'm only sure of my love for you, but yes, this is temporary. And it is.
And love is a high vibration, right?
Love is a high vibration. So even if you're in the muck of it, you just need to believe that it's possible for you to find the light. And yes, you can find something. You're breathing. You're listening to this podcast. You can be grateful for that. Something led you to this conversation because this is what you need to hear right now. And if you can put it into practice, it will help you start coming out of that stuck situation or whatever you're experiencing.
And when you're sometimes even stuck, right? Sometimes, well, there's the old saying, and I really don't like this kind of old saying just because of the verbiage, the language, but it's a saying that people know. It's like, fake it till you make it. So even if you have to kind of like, well, I'm not grateful for anything, but I'm going to try it anyway, right?
Well, Tony Robbins says, act as if, right? You just act as if. You just act as if you're grateful. Act as if you're healed. How would a healed person act? Or what would a healed person eat? Or what would they be thinking?
And that's a great way to put it, because and then that's going to shift, because what I have learned when I personally even struggle with the whole gratitude thing, because I really struggle because I didn't see my kids for 5 years. I couldn't understand why my kids were given to a documented abuser. Like, why would somebody do that? Right. And, so the more I dove into like the whole surrender and tapping into the kind of act as if, then I started realizing that, okay, well, oh, geez, that just happened. And then the more, because you start building this whole sense of awareness, then the gratitude thing starts to create momentum, right? And then you start noticing the other things start shifting in your
Well,
life.
like I said, what you focus on grows stronger in your life.
Yeah.
So if people focus on problems or things that, all the pain and all that stuff, which I know sometimes it's difficult to, we tend to give our focus to that. We're aware of that. It just becomes more obvious. But if we start focusing on what's not hurting, or where in my life is something good, or, today I felt good for 5 minutes or whatever it is, then that starts growing. All of a sudden you'll have a good day. And maybe
Yes.
you'll have a couple shitty days, and then you'll have 2 good days. And, it does start growing. Look, I came from a serious, I've overcome some serious shit, the suicide of my husband, and then cancer, and thinking I was going to die, and all these things. And somehow I managed to create a beautiful, loved and loving life, that is healed, and it's possible. It's absolutely possible.
I always say for us too, to be able to speak about it, we have to overcome it ourselves. And,
Yeah.
and part of this podcast is bringing in stories like yourself, because you're walking testimony. You're as somebody who overcame societal identification challenges, right? And misperceptions growing up to, like what you just said, and being told you're only going to have 10% chance of living. Well, some people would carry that on and go, okay, well, why bother, right?
Well,
And so,
I did
yeah.
do that initially, but you just said something really great. And it just skipped my mind. What did you just say? You said, oh shit, I can't remember what you just said. I was like, oh my God, latch onto that. But I'm sure that whoever
Oh,
is
come on.
listening to this went, yes, that's awesome. You just said something
Because
really
I
brilliant.
mean, this whole idea is really about bringing in folks like yourself who have championed, who've actually walked the walk. I've seen part of the challenges is hosting a podcast like this is when I bring in guests, and then I find out that they might not have actually walked the walk like they talk it, because you can easily tell. And the whole point of this is really bringing in people who have walked it, because when you have walked it, now you really have a story to tell. And one, even in my own journey, is if I haven't overcome them saying I needed a hysterectomy or this infection or that, and getting off of all the medications they initially prescribed me for my PTSD and all that stuff, then how can I show somebody else how to do it too?
Yeah. Well, that's what we were talking about, the healing journey,
Yeah.
that, you have to get on the other side of it. And I just remembered what you just said. You can't really, unless you've healed it, you can't really talk about it. You can't really help others get through it. When I was doing my show, and it was very cathartic to write the whole thing, I cried and cried and cried. And a lot of my healing happened as I was writing the show and I was editing it. And my director said, you can't perform something if it's still an open wound. You have to be able to be healed in order to perform that. Because there was a moment in the song that I sing after the suicide in the show, when I wrote it, and the first month that I tried to sing it, I couldn't sing the song without just breaking down into tears. It was just so deeply felt and so moving. And now I sing the song because I was able to heal it. And when I sing the song, it affects the audience in a really deep way, but I'm okay as an actor performing it. And I thought, I overcame that. Otherwise I couldn't perform it.
That
So
is
it's
so
just,
beautiful.
yeah,
It's
it's
so
really,
beautiful,
yeah.
and I'm so grateful for this conversation and
Thank
your
you.
beautiful journey. I mean, what a story. I mean,
Thank you.
seriously, you know, you're right in your bio, the Renaissance man. I mean, holy cow, and I can't wait for you to come to Boston, because,
Thank you.
you
Well,
know,
we are hoping to take the story through, hopefully, the college circuit. We're doing theater festivals. And of course, I would love to have a few theaters, land the show in different theaters around town. We also want to take it to cancer centers and be able to share the story with cancer patients, and then facilitate workshops where they can write monologues about their healing journeys. And there's
that is
all
so
these different plans.
beautiful.
So the show is more than just a show. It's going to be kind of like a platform from which different workshops happen.
That is so beautiful, because that's, again, because you have this gift, because you've walked it, you've walked it and you've championed it against some of the odds that many people would. And that's kind of the thing, is like, how do we champion this, and how do we lift others up, especially during difficult times, especially the difficult times we're in right now, right? It's like, how do we continue to lift folks up? And
well, that's my commitment. That's my mission in life after coming through, especially this last adventure, I call it my cancer adventure, is I'm really committed to doing what I can to help inspire people and to lift people up, and through workshops and coaching or whatever it takes. So if people are interested, can I mention about that?
I was just gonna say, how can people find you and about the shows again?
I don't have a tour yet planned. I mean, this is just being birthed right now. We just happened to finish the Hollywood Fringe, and there are plans for other things, but I don't have a city tour. But there are plans to do streaming of the show. We have a beautiful video that came out great, and we've already done a couple of streaming shows online through Zoom. And then we do a live talk back afterwards with the audience. And it's so moving and so inspiring. So people can go to outoftheblueshow.com. And there's a place where they can send us a note and actually sign up on our list. And then we will periodically send information about where our new cities are, or when we have the next live streaming show. So that's one wonderful way. And the other place they could contact us is, my husband and I both do life coaching, life and creativity, and business coaching. And our website is called sublimeguys.com. Sublime Guys, because our interior design company was called Sublime Design, and we came to be known as the Sublime Guys. So we started a business called the Sublime Guys, sublimeguys.com, for coaching. And we both do life and creativity coaching. So if anybody needs a personal lift to be able to reinvent your life in the direction of your dreams, that is one way that we can support you.
Well, thank you so much. You are such a beautiful soul with such a beautiful gift. And I am so grateful to have you on here.
Oh, thank you. I'm so glad.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for inviting me.
Thank you.
Okay.
And for those of you listening, don't forget, follow, like, subscribe. See you till next time.